Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga, wisdom, and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host Raghunath and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York City, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is our daily study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the preeminent yoga wisdom literature for reconnecting the spirit soul with divinity. That's what the author says itself. There's a lot of books on yoga, mysticism, metaphysics, etc. Srimad Bhagavatam, this is the cream of the crop, the crown jewel. Happy to be here with everybody every morning at 5 a.m. If you want to join us live on Zoom, you can do it. You just got to email our assistant and friend, Mara. Wisdom of the Sages, 108@gmail.com. That's our email address, wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. And Kaustubha, how are you, by the way, Kaustubha?
I'm doing good.
Good. Alrighty. And before we start, we just want to make some announcements.
Okay. You did Sweet Baby Krishna last night, and people were raving about it.
I did a surprise little class on Patreon yesterday. We had a little Patreon party where we read some Advent of Lord Krishna and the story of Sudama, the Brahmana. And tonight we're going to finish that story. I'm going to do it after Madhu's class. So Madhu is giving a Kirtan Q&A class tonight at, what time, Mara? 6?
6, yep.
6, okay. So at 8 p.m. tonight, for anyone who wants to stay up at 8, I will wind down your day, especially if you're from the Eastern Standard Time. I will wind down your day with some Krishna pastimes, little Sweet Baby Krishna pastimes.
Okay.
And we do that. If you want to join Patreon, you can. Patreon.com/wisdom of the sages. Any amount of support you like to give goes a long way. We're really grateful for that. It helps us keep this thing going. This show was just started just as a little podcast amongst friends, and it developed into a full-time job.
I also posted something to Patreon yesterday, a talk I gave to the ISKCON temple community out in Denver over the weekend.
Oh, nice.
So that's a talk about how it's called "How Knowledge Matures into Wisdom." And if anybody listened to the previous things I posted there's one series called "The Sage of Steady Mind." This is kind of on the same theme, but it's got questions and answers to it and everything like that. So you can check that out if you like.
All righty, we got a good thing going. And tomorrow's
and what's going on with asana today on Patreon?
Yeah, what's going on with asana today, Mara G?
Nothing.
Friday's nothing. Why don't you teach a class, Mara? You did teacher training.
Yeah.
Got to bring some cooking classes back, though.
Yeah, I'll see if Damodar Priya can do another one.
You could do.
Or you could. Or you could hear our hint. Which we're dropping loud. Well, let's get this party started. And we start out with these little mantras. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshvabhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service to the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Gyana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Midatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we are reading from Canto 2. We're still in the same purport yesterday from Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 35.
This is day number 3 we're on this.
Day number 3, the same purport. So the purports, if you're new to this, the commentaries, the great masters write commentaries on very significant verses. And sometimes it's really worth sort of like teasing out their commentaries for our benefit. So we are in one that has a very long purport, but a very significant purport. And Kaustubha, giving his beautiful commentaries on the commentaries, enlightening us all, and me rattling off my 2 cents. This is how we've been doing the show for the last.
Love your 2 cents. So this verse, let's read it again. Let's read the verse.
Sure.
It's Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 35. And this is right where Shukadeva Goswami is getting to the heart of the matter. He's described different paths of yoga, but now he's saying this is really what's advised, is to focus on bhakti, to focus on connecting to God with love through loving devotional service. So he says, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being, along with the individual soul. So every living body has 2 souls in it. The soul that embodies that body, but also the paramatma is there. And so he says, and this fact is perceived, that you can perceive this, that you can understand this, that if you're a little thoughtful about life, you can perceive this. He says, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized. You can infer it, in other words, in our acts of seeing or perception, and how we take help from the intelligence. And I was just looking at the Sanskrit, the last word in this verse is anumāna, right? So like that's, with my meager Sanskrit understanding, there's this word anumāna, right? That when it comes to yoga epistemology, how one understands, what is the means of knowledge? How do I understand what is true? These yogi philosophers would break it down. There's 3 basic ways you can understand that something's true. Pratyakṣa, which means, empirically, that you can perceive something with your senses. That's one way of understanding. And anumāna, which we're discussing here, which means to infer, that you can put the pieces together in your mind, you can figure it out. And then third is Śabda, which means to hear from an authoritative source, right? And
those are worth writing down for those students.
Yeah,
pratyakṣa. Take notes.
These are the kind of things you learn in your Bhakti class, right? When you first start to get trained in the philosophy, that there's 3 ways that we can understand things.
Truthfully, it's even beyond the Bhaktas say this. I think all schools of Indian thought, Vedic thought, they say these 3 ways of.
That's right. And then in Vedanta, which is the classical school of Indian philosophy that we're following in Bhakti Yoga, it'll establish that Śabda is actually the most solid way to understand, right? If you can hear from the right source, then you can understand things that are beyond your perception. And your perception has all kinds of weaknesses, your direct perception, your empiric perception. And in terms of anumāna or inference, it's also faulty. We come to so many false conclusions. But if you can hear from a source that's got it straight, and that's what the Vedic texts are presented as, then you can understand directly from that authoritative source. But this verse is talking about anumāna, that you can, it's not saying that here's the definitive proof, but it's saying, hey, think about life, think about it. If you slow down for a second and begin to think about how you perceive things, and how you understand things, and how the intelligence functions, and how we understand things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to understand, that we're dependent at every step, then you can begin to understand that there's something more going on here. And so Srila Prabhupada's taken us in this commentary, which we'll finish now. He's taken us through some stages he's made some points. His first point was that we can begin to perceive the presence of God directing us within through reason, through anumāna, right? Through inference. Particularly if we have an attitude of service. If our disposition is right, some of these things will seem obvious to us. If our disposition isn't like that, then we may not understand. And we all have experiences like that, right? When, like, say you have a friend or maybe a child and they have a strong desire, and you're trying to tell them something that should be obvious, but they just can't understand it because that desire is clouding their ability to understand it. You ever experienced that as a parent, Raghu?
Yeah. Yep.
So if your attitude is right, then some of these things will begin to, oh yeah, I get it. It makes sense. And then he says we perceive the body, and therefore we're not the body. There's the observer and the observed. And if I can observe my body, and if I can observe my mind, it means that I'm not either of these things. And he goes on to explain that our ability to perceive has not come about by our own work, but has been supplied to us, right? Even right from the very beginning. That and also that which we perceive and our ability to move is supplied to us as well. You know, I desire to lift this pen up, but the process by which it takes place, we really can't explain that. You know, even science can explain so much about it, but they can't ultimately explain it. So some from somewhere else is coming my ability to move, my ability to perceive. And then Prabhupada came with this very interesting point. The fact that we're dissatisfied with matter is also an indication that by nature we are beyond matter, that we are spirit.
Great point, huh?
It's a great point. And then he says we can experience God within in the form of intelligence or inner guidance, that there is a voice that's speaking to me from within. And we can choose how we wish to be guided. That voice will, if we want illusion, that voice will supply it for us. And if we want truth, that voice will supply it for us. So we can choose which way we want to go. Do I want to go towards illusion, or do I want to go to truth? And that's the essence of our free will. And then he says this is clearly there is clearly a distinction between the self and the super self. That voice inside me is supplying to me, and I am the supplied. And so now we're going to read on the last couple points that he covers in this commentary. But you know, this idea about that we're being prompted within, that there is a source of intelligence that's supplying to us an understanding that speaks to us. You know, if we are thoughtful, we'll perceive it in so many different ways. And yesterday we touched on this idea about these turtles, right?
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's just observation, right? That where is it in Costa Rica? And I imagine other places too.
It's other places in the world, but a lot of us know Costa Rica because
Yeah.
it's gigantic. I forgot to do the research on the name of those turtles. If you know it, right in the book, they're these bahula turtles, I think they're called.
Bahula.
Super massive, biggest turtles in the world, the size of a small Volkswagen.
Really? But they start off as these tiny, cute little,
Yeah.
soft, tender little turtles, right?
Tender, delicious, delicious.
No. Although some perceive them as delicious, right?
Yeah.
Some, when they look at that turtle, we think, oh, that soft little thing, get to the water. And another thing is, oh, tender, delicious.
Mm.
And so they come out of that shell, and they have an understanding right from the very beginning. I'm in danger. I need to run for it. The water is safety. I need to get there as quickly as possible. And they just sprint, you know?
How did they know?
How did they know?
How did they know? They didn't huddle together. Okay, guys, we're going to do this. Their mom didn't leave them a note on the counter. The mom left.
The mom left.
Mom laid the eggs, buried them, took off back to the sea.
Right. And so that turtle, that little turtle, now, you know, what's being said here is just think about it. At least consider it as a possibility, because science hasn't explained anything else better, actually. They can put forward hypotheses too that can't ultimately be proven. But just think about the idea that it's being prompted from within to run for it. Because how can it understand what danger is? How can it understand that it's in danger? And even if that danger presents itself, like even if one of those vultures comes right in front of it, how can it understand that that's a danger to me? How can it understand that there's safety in the water? But what Prabhupada is saying here is try to understand that within us all, there's the super soul prompting us, right? And if we desire truth, if we desire divine love, then we'll hear that message loud and clear.
That whisper.
Whisper
of God. I like that better. The whisper.
Divine whisper.
But it's interesting because the animals with that, what they call instinct, we call the divine whisper. Maybe in that case with a baby turtle, a loud shouting, "Run for the ocean! Run for your life! Get deep underwater." I'm wondering because in the human animal, there is also that instinct to breastfeed. All these newborn babies, they go right for the breast. What is that? That is like the instinct. At what point if they're really hearing that voice of God, at what point does it get covered by illusion? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you used the word instinct, and I was just watching a little clip on these turtles, and then
Watched a little clip?
I watched a little clip.
Clip?
Like a National Geographic clip,
Hey, Mara, Kaustubha's been watching clips.
You got a problem with that?
Got some watching
research.
Doing some research and development for the show.
Yeah.
What did you watch?
It was a National Geographic clip, and what the narrator said, he was the same. He said that the little turtle was running for it, and he was saying that first they focus in on the face of the turtle, right? They focus in on the face of the vulture. Pretty scary, right?
Not a vulture.
No, it was a vulture.
Vultures eat the dead bodies.
No, this was a vulture, Raghunath. I just watched the clip. I did my research, okay? There's vultures, and then there was another bird also that even the vultures had to back off on. But first was the vulture.
You sure it was a vulture?
Positive.
Because the vultures eat the dead bodies.
Well, these vultures, it's like a once in a year hatching or something like that, right? It's a special treat for the vulture.
Yeah. For the birds, except the vulture, who would eat the dead ones. I'm going to have to go head to head with you on this one.
I'll pull it up right now.
That's okay. We'll do this after class. We'll settle this after school in the courtyard.
So it focuses on the face of the vulture, and then it focuses in on the face of the poor little turtle. It's coming out of the hole. It's got like sand over its face and everything like that, and it's looking all vulnerable. And it's talking about, and it's speaking about the little turtle that just came out of the shell just a few seconds ago, right? And it's saying like, it knows that it has this challenge ahead. It's got to.
I like the narrators always. The Winnie the Pooh voice.
But what does that turtle? What does that turtle actually know? It had zero education, right? Nobody's come and identified what is dangerous or even what danger is, So it knows nothing, but it's being prompted from it. This is what Prabhupada is saying. Try to understand. It's being prompted from within that what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, what the Srimad Bhagavatam is saying, what the Upanishads are saying is being illustrated here. That within the body of every living being, there's not only the soul of that little turtle, but there's the paramatma, and the paramatma is whispering, go, right? Run for it. Go for the water. And it's following that prompting and making a run for it. Why is it running like hell? I mean, that thing is like, it is like, running for its life.
And so in any case, those birds, who knows if they're getting this?
They're also
the voice of God. Go to Playa Grande in Costa Rica and kill those babies. It's a feast time. It's the special time of year. It's the festival. It's the turtle festival.
So, maybe we can just read a little something from Bhagavad Gita before we get back into this commentary. And this is Bhagavad Gita, the end of the 13th chapter, which speaks a lot about the paramatma, right? It says in text 1334, Yata prakashyayat yekaha kritsnam lokam imam ravi kshetram kshetri tata kritsnam prakashyat prakashayati Bharata. O son of Bharata, O Arjuna, Krishna says, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe. It's kind of a beautiful, kind of poetic verse, right? Sure. As the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the soul within the body illuminate the entire body by consciousness.
Fibonacci.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if there's any Fibonacci.
That's so Fibonacci. I'm not even want to say it. That's so
but you don't want to say it. You can't resist saying
it. I'm just saying it's the micro and the macro. It's the same thing. The soul illuminates the body. The body becomes alive.
That's right.
Comes filled with light.
Yeah. So again, as the sages, as they wake up in the morning and they see the sun, they think they connect it to the sun. Just as that sun is permeating the universe, so my soul is permeating the body. Now here's Prabhupada's commentary. He says there are various theories regarding consciousness. Okay. Here, and by the way, consciousness is one of the great mysteries of science that it's like advancing in the past century. Like there's a lot of talk about it, a lot of thought about it, and a lot of reference going back to these literatures. Different scientists are realizing that the idea that consciousness is an irreducible principle. Right, that it is not something that you can build or something that comes together and at a certain point material ingredients become consciousness. No, that what Bhagavad Gita is saying here is saying that consciousness is irreducible. Right, it exists as its own, as a separate type of energy from material energy. So Prabhupada says there are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in Bhagavad Gita, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place, but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul, although situated in the heart of this body, is illuminating the whole body with consciousness. Thus, consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. It's just that simple inference right there, right? That if I experience sunshine, I know there has to be a source of it. And similarly, if I am conscious, and if I experience consciousness in the tips of my fingers and the tips of my toes and all over my body, then I know that that consciousness is coming from a source, like the sunlight comes from the sun, and that is the soul. So thus consciousness is proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is proof of the presence of the sun. When the soul is present in the body, there's consciousness all over the body. And as soon as the soul is passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be easily understood by any intelligent man. Therefore, consciousness is not a product of the combinations of matter. It is the symptom of the living entity. The consciousness of the living entity, although qualitatively one with the supreme consciousness, we're of the same energy of God, is not supreme because the consciousness of one particular body does not share that of another body. Like my consciousness is spread throughout my body. If someone comes and taps me on the back, I experience it. If my body is hungry, I understand it and perceive it. If my body is tired, I perceive that. But I don't know what's going on in your body, Raghunath, right? You're perceiving that. My consciousness is limited to mine. Your consciousness is limited to your body. But the super soul, Prabhupada says, which is situated in all bodies, as the friend of the individual soul, is conscious of all bodies. It's this all-pervasive principle that's spread throughout every atom of the universe. That is the difference between the supreme consciousness and the individual consciousness. And then the next verse, text 35, says, those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in the material nature, they attain to the supreme goal. So it's saying that this is what we're meant to contemplate. This is what we're meant to think about. Try to infer, think about it, read about it, see if it makes sense. This is what human life is really meant for, trying to understand the answers to these questions. All right. What do you think about that, Raghu?
I think these are, it's good stuff. It's worth teasing out.
Okay. So then let's dip back into our, this commentary. And we can continue where Prabhupada begins to explain this 10th point, that he's already said that common sense, this kind of inference, common sense can take us to the conclusion of realizing that these three features of existence, that there's matter, like my body, that there's the soul, there's me, but then there's also a voice, a divine voice, a whisper, whatever you want to call it, or the paramatma that's providing with me intelligence. But now he's going to say that beyond, so that we can understand through inference these three different features of existence: matter, the soul or the self, and the super soul. Inference can take us to understand that. But now he's going to say that beyond inference, if we hear from the direction of the Vedic text, we can understand that there's a person that is the source of the paramatma, right? And that's ultimately Krishna. Would you like to read the commentary here? Beginning with so far as? Or maybe not.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm just looking at your notes, so lost.
Yes. So the notes beginning from so far as point number 10.
Okay. I might have the wrong.
Okay.
I'm trying to find your note. You know what happened? My big screen stopped working, so I got everything jammed on my tiny little.
Oh, okay.
laptop.
I'll read it then. No problem.
Please.
So far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities, namely matter, spirit, and super spirit. Now, if we go to the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic intelligence, so now there's another source of intelligence, and that's these sacred texts, right? Now, if we go beyond that, if we go to Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic intelligence, we can further understand that all three identities, namely matter, individual spirit, and super spirit, are all dependent on the supreme personality of Godhead, that there's a person behind it all. The super self is a partial representation or plenary portion of the supreme personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad Gita affirms that the supreme personality of Godhead dominates over all the material world by his partial representation only, and that's the super soul. God is great. This is an interesting point that Prabhupada makes. He says God is great, and he cannot be simply an order supplier of the individual selves. Therefore, the super self cannot be a full representation of the supreme self, Purushottam, the absolute personality of Godhead. So in other words, the paramatma is there to respond to our desires, to prompt us in a way according to our desires. But God's got to be more than just that. And so what we're going to hear about in Bhagavatam is God is that supreme being who ultimately enjoys loving pastimes, right? Not just taking care of the desires of these misguided souls in the material world. So he's saying, so he goes on, realization of the super self by the individual self is the beginning of self-realization. And by the progress of such self-realization, one is able to realize the supreme personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of the Lord. So that's not something that you're going to realize, that supreme person, that divine being, who roams the forest of Vrindavan, engaged in pastimes and adventures of love. That is something that you can't come to by inference, but that has to be revealed through the text and ultimately by the grace of God. And the practice of bhakti is to become receptacles to that grace. All right.
It's interesting with the idea of this Śabda Brahman. This is that third way, that what we value as the highest way of hearing to an American. That's considered dogma. You know what I mean? Just to hear something, the very American, you do a quick search of what the actual meaning of dogma is. But I think it means to accept something just for the sake of accepting it, as taught by previous authorities. You got it, Mary?
All right. Yep. A principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true.
There. So Śabda Brahman in one sense, and by an American standpoint, because we feel like we've been burned sometimes historically due to a religious system that we don't like to hear or accept something just because previous people have said it. We want to try it out ourselves, or we want to figure it out. And you know, I want to do these. I want to use inference, and I want to use trial and error. But the highest thing is these hearing from a Vedic authority, and that's why, like when Kaustubha speaks or when Prabhupada speaks, he'll always refer to previous masters have said in the Bhagavad Gita. It states, like right now we're doing a Bhagavad Gita Bhagavatam commentary, but Kaustubha is always referring to the Bhagavad Gita and going back and quoting the Bhagavad Gita. And it's to sort of keep ourselves in check that we don't go off base with what we're actually teaching. Kaustubha, you want to share something, the difference between why it's not dogmatic to just accept Vedic authority? If someone was to challenge you, what would you say?
Well, I would say it is quite literally, it is dogmatic. Right? But we've given.
Hold it! Pause the show, Mara. Pause the show. He's got off his rocker.
Well, you know, here's again the definition of dogma. It's a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true, and so that we accept. But the point is, the point is that if you give dogma a bad name. Right.
Yeah, dogma's got a bad name. That's the only problem here.
But what's happening in this commentary is Prabhupada's saying is that, first of all, let's look at how the Vedic literature is considered. It'll use analogies to help us understand the value of Śabda, or the value of why hearing is the most important. It's going to show us the frailties of, say, like direct perception in the most simple ways. It'll explain it in the most simple way, but then if you think about it deeply, you can go deeper into it. Like, for instance, direct perception. When I look in the sky, I see the sun. When I hold my hand up to the sun, my hand is bigger than the sun. So by direct perception, I'll come to a conclusion that my hand is bigger than the sun, right? And it's just a very simple way, but you can take that thought deeper and deeper and understand how profound it is. And that's what writers like Jiva Goswami and so many of these great, commentators have done.
What to speak of the water appearing on the very hot highway, and then as you drive closer to the water, you realize it's a mirage.
It's a mirage, sure.
So
or the snake appears as a rope, or the rope appears to be a snake, and so many analogies are given. And then the same with anumāna, that it's obvious that we come to so many false conclusions all the time. Now the analogy that's given for Śabda or hearing is that if one wants to know who their father is, and this analogy kind of extends, because like, for instance, if I want to know who God is, then it said that you find that out from the mother, and the mother in the analogy would be the Vedic text that you hear from. But it's a simple analogy, but it's also kind of profound. Like, if I've been born and I want to determine who my father is, there's so many ways that I could try. And this is an analogy that predates like modern DNA testing and things like that, right? So if I want to
clarify that, this is before 23andMe.
Yeah, if I want to find out who my father is, my perception doesn't extend far enough to find that out, right? I wasn't born yet, so I won't be able to directly perceive who my father is. And if I try to speculate about it, well, I don't know, that person seems like me, or that person looks, I can speculate, but I may or may not come to the right conclusion. But if I can confirm it with the mother, she knows, right? She was there. she can tell me for sure. So the mother can provide that perfect information because she knows.
So the Vedas is considered the mother. We go to the source of the mother.
The Vedas considered, but my point is this: the point that I would like to address your point is that it's not saying that just rely on the dogma. This whole commentary is like saying, hey, apply anumāna to this question, right? Ponder this, think about it, observe, and then reason, apply your reasoning to this to help you understand it. So it's not that we rely purely, exclusively, but the point is that if I want to understand who God is, and the Vedic teachings say it's a
blue little cowherd boy.
It's a blue cowherd boy, and he his only business is adventures of divine love. They play out this way. They play out that way. Here are all the subtleties to it. here are all the details to it. I'm not going to come to that conclusion through empirically, and I'm not going to come to that conclusion through inference. I need to hear from a source that has that information. Otherwise, what is a day in the life of a person in China? I don't know, and I can't directly perceive it. And I can't.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, and it's just something beyond it's beyond my direct perception. It's beyond my inference. So I have to hear from a source that has been there and knows.
We see this in Ayurvedic medicine. A lot of these herbs, healing herbs, we would never know to mix them or to put them together in some type of churna, for our digestion, etc. But we hear from authorities. They're not coming from one wise doctor. They were divinely inspired. What's the word? Apurashaya, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Divinely inspired. And even a lot of these ancient practices like acupuncture, we try to think of what is the source? What is the source? And these ancient teachings say these sources are eternal. It's knowledge that's trickling down over centuries, and it ends up in your lap by some type of mercy. And you can't figure it out on your. Now we can sort of this is how they did it, and this is why. We're trying to put the science to it, and this is why these pranayama works. But really, these are just trickling down. They were given by higher. We tend to think people who lived in the past, they were a bunch of Neanderthal men. But the idea is different. They were very, very lucid, strong-minded, deeply intelligent, wise, masters, giving these subtle sciences, and they were passed down in parampara or disciplic succession, millennia after millennia. And they somehow ended up on our lap sitting here, wherever we're sitting in any town, USA, or wherever you're from. And they trickle down for millennia, and they stay preserved by us applying them and living them and also passing them on.
Sure. Yeah, and Krishangi is saying on the chat board that I'd say that the process of sadhana bhakti isn't dogmatic, because through practice we get spiritual experiences that match those described in the scriptures, in those texts, and confirm that that the process really works. And so I'd say exactly, in one sense, the Vedic teachings are dogma, but then we're encouraged to experiment with them and apply our direct perception to the results, and also to contemplate the teachings. Think about it, apply anumāna to it, apply your inference to it, see if it makes sense.
Well, we went into that definition yesterday of Bhakti-yoga, where you said, sadhana yoga, of practicing a regulated spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And another definition that the Nectar of Devotion gives is it's a regular practice as instructed by the spiritual master, as instructed by the gurus. Mm-hmm. This is what you're going to do. And that, in one sense, there's an element of dogma there. But once you apply it, then all of a sudden these things start to become revealed to you. And therefore, the dogma starts to. We're not expecting a person to live in that dogma perpetually. Things will start to unfold immediately, but it's almost like giving a person some type of directions on the road as they drive, and eventually they'll understand. I am going west. He gave me these weird directions how to, take a U-turn here. It's behind the parking lot there, and you got to go through that, get me out of the village or of the city, and then all of a sudden you're going to hit Interstate 80 and you're going to head straight across to San Francisco. So I just came up with that analogy on the spot.
It did remind me of the Californians.
Hope it was the Hope that was okay.
That's great. Okay, and now we can conclude this commentary.
Henry says, Bhakti is experience.
It's experiential. Definitely.
It's experiential. Yeah, it is. Yeah. You do experience it for sure. And I can't experience Kaustubha's Bhakti and vice versa. You know what I mean? That's an interesting thing. It's not like we all have this. It's not like we're all jumping in the ocean together and we feel that we're all experiencing it uniquely for everything. Because I've had experiences that Mara's never had and vice versa. And Papa Tony's had experiences in his life that I've never had. So we experience it in different ways. And Krishna comes to us uniquely, dancing with each one of us uniquely.
What kind of dance do you do?
I do the jig, various types of jigs.
Okay. So Prabhupada continues, and now this final point is that we can realize the existence of that person that's behind the supersoul, behind the soul, behind the body and the material energy. We can realize the existence of that person ultimately by the grace of that person. So he says, the Bhagavad Gita is the preliminary conception of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the further explanation of the science of Godhead. So if we stick to our determination, do the practice, and pray for the mercy, so it's a combination of our effort and of grace, right? And pray for the mercy of the director of intelligence, sitting within the same bodily tree, like a bird sitting with another bird, as explained in the Upanishads. Certainly, the purport of the revealed information of the Vedas becomes clear to our vision, and there's no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. The intelligent man, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, of inference, of anumāna, of everything that he's been talking about in this commentary, the intelligent person, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, surrenders himself at the lotus feet of Vasudeva, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Bahunam Janmana Ante Jnanavam Prapajante Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadurlabhaha. So, Prabhupada here, he's going to say that he refers to this Upanishadic analogy of the two birds sitting in the tree, right? And this is found in the Mundaka Upanishad and the Śvetashvatara Upanishad, that it describes that the body is like a tree, and there's two birds sitting on the branch of the tree. One of the birds is trying to taste the fruits of the tree. That's us. And it's and the other bird is just watching, just witnessing,
Checking them out.
And then the verse goes on to, it continues on, that says, although the two birds are in the same tree, the bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. So the one that's the person in this world, like within every body, there's two souls. There's the paramatma that has no interest in trying to enjoy the material resources. But then there's us, the atma, and we're busy trying to taste the fruits. We're working hard. We're trying to manipulate the material energy. We're trying to make money. We're trying to get this. We're trying to get that. We're trying to get away from this, get away from that. Working hard, trying to find some pleasure, but in one way or another experiencing moroseness or anxiety. Right? So although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend, who's the Lord, and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free of all anxieties. Right? That's it's through that reconnection. So that's in the Mundaka Upanishad and the Śvetashvatara Upanishad, both of those texts, and very famous, passage from the Upanishads. But here's what these texts are telling us: to try to understand that our intelligence, and that there's a prompting that we have within, that there is a voice within, that is not subject to the same kind of material confusion that we have, that our anxiety and moroseness is due to our disconnection with that there are layers of conditioning in our mind that prevent us from hearing that voice clearly or from connecting to that divine being within our own heart. And that through the process of yoga, we can purify the mind, purify the consciousness of those layers of conditioning, and actually reconnect. And if we can reconnect, then our anxiety and our moroseness will subside. That's it.
Interesting, huh? Yeah. Like the instinct of human, the purest form of instinct is the paramatma.
And so that very last line, or was it the last line? Or was it an earlier line that it mentioned that the that the paramatma is just like one small feature of Krishna, who's unlimited, right? And Prabhupada alluded to this verse from Bhagavad Gita 10:42. Atava bahunaitena kim gyatena tavarjuna vistabhyaham idam kritsnam ekam sena stito jagat. And this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Arjuna, there's beautiful verses in there where Krishna says from within the heart, earlier in the chapter, 10th chapter, like texts, 10 and 11. He says, from within the heart, for one who's devoted to serving with love, from within I enlighten them. And then Arjuna begins to speak about, Krishna, I accept all that you're saying, that you are, in the verses just prior to that, I am the source of all material and spiritual energies. I'm the source of the devas and all the planets and so on. The wise who know this, surrender unto me with love. And Arjuna is saying, I accept everything that you say. Please reveal further, your glories. And Krishna begins to describe how he can be seen, in all existence. And he gives a long list of ways that he can be seen and meditated on. And then he says, but in this, towards the end of that chapter, he says this verse. He says that, but what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, right? Krishna's playing in Vrindavan. He's engaged in divine loving pastimes and adventures. But with a single fragment of himself, he pervades and supports the entire universe. And so this is Prabhupada's commentary on that, part of his commentary. He says, the Supreme Lord is represented throughout the entire material universes by his entering into all things as the super soul, as the paramatma. The Lord here tells Arjuna that there's no point in understanding how things exist in their separate opulence and grandeur. He should know that all things are existing due to Krishna's entering them as a super soul. From Brahma, the most gigantic entity, on down to the smallest ant, all are existing because the Lord has entered into each and all and is sustaining them. So these are things that people can contemplate. And and we also have the advantage of people we look at this and say, okay, that's a simple thing, a simple religious belief, a simple kind of spiritual concept. But there are people like that Dr. Richard, Thompson, Sadhuputta who is, he'll go into how this concept is consistent with, quantum physics and so on. And in great detail begin to lay out, I wish I could do that more, but, how this idea that there's a consciousness. First of all, that consciousness is something that's irreducible. That consciousness is something that is individual, and that consciousness, but that there is a divine consciousness that pervades every atom of existence and ties it all together and makes it all work together. That this otherwise simple spiritual or religious idea can be seen as consistent with so much of the scientific discovery. And then through one's inference, one can say, well, what makes more sense? That there is an intelligence behind everything? That there is an intelligence that creates these unbelievably complex, features of creation, and that ties it all together, and that there's a meaning and a purpose behind it, that I can elevate myself and become more wise and more realized and a better person, and ultimately that it all works towards divine love? Or the idea, what I would call the religious belief, or let's say dogmatic belief. Some scientist has said that this is the way it is and I accept it as dogma, but that there is no meaning to it all, and that all this complexity is just, random. It just popped up on its own, and that there's zero meaning to it all. Which one makes more sense? And if you accept it's A rather than B, well, then this Vedic literature has so much to offer in depth of how to understand it, in terms of philosophy, in terms of science, in terms of yoga, in terms of aesthetics, in terms of emotion, there's in terms of art, there's so much there. In terms of theology, it's so vast and it's consistent and it's brilliant and it's beautiful. So why not at least why not at least admit that it's a possibility, right? And then experiment with it and see what you find.
Kaustubha, you are on fire.
You're on fire, Bubba. And you're going to be on fire tonight with Sweet Baby Krishna.
Yes, I am.
People are raving about it, Raghu.
My daughter, blessings. She's getting her first cell phone today.
Uh-oh. Careful there, Sachi.
We bless that she use it for good instead of evil. It's a big thing in a father's life to give your daughter a cell phone, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Are you kidding? It enters a whole world of her once very sheltered life. Now she's got this whole world right in front of her at her fingertips. Yes, it's almost like a coming of age. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful hearing the Bhagavatam every morning. Thanks for everybody on Zoom. Others out there, thanks, and let your otherness be known. We want to know you're out there. If we don't see you, how do we know you even exist? Write us a note and tell us your story on Apple Podcasts. You can go there and you can leave a review and you can tell us your whole story so we can all hear about you. I also want to say I'm going to be in New York City in 2 weeks.
September 19th.
Yeah, at the Bhakti Center. We're going to do a rooftop program, and I want all these Zoomies to come and show up. And if you're an other out there and you live nearby, come on down, and we're going to sing and jump around and eat prasad together, eat lunch together on the rooftop in New York City. And I'm looking forward to it. And I will join you tonight, Patreon members, at 8 p.m. for Sweet Baby Krishna. And remember, Madhu, our little kirtan genius, will be at what time? 6:30, you said?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. We'll be here on Patreon. So it's patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages if you want to enter that little Patreon party. And now we're going to ask you guys to lip sync and sing to start to leave your body. Use your body to leave your body. This is my morning ritual.